My rebound scammer. I was in a relationship with my boyfriend for 3 years. A month to the date we broke up, I met Paul online. We met through a message board group. It was similar to another popular message board website that I think you all know, but this one was geared towards talking about relationships, advice about what to do about cheaters, and other relationship based advice. I posted after my breakup with my boyfriend that I'd been cheated on and asked for advice on moving on. Most people on the message board do not have profile pictures. Paul replied to my post stating that I did not deserve to be cheated on and how a real good man would never cheat. I thanked Paul for his comment. I was on this message board a lot and gave advice or commentary on people's posts, so my status was higher. You see, you earn points for every question you answer or respond to. Paul's status was bronze, which means he had not commented a lot on posts, and his profile was fairly new as his join date was only about a month old. I was a platinum status member as I'd been on the site for many years and I'd answered and asked many questions. Paul sent me a private message telling me that he was sorry to hear about me being cheated on and told me how he felt bad for me, but he understood what I was going through as his ex wife had cheated on him with his best friend while he was deployed in the military. I told him I was so sorry to hear this. He told me he was 35 years old and he had been married for 10 years and found out his wife was cheating for many years without him knowing. They had a daughter named Jessica, and he had full custody as his ex wife didn't want their daughter and ran off with his best friend. He said his daughter was 8 years old, and he said he'd been single for a couple of years and is a single father raising his daughter. Paul said he's in the Army and often gets deployed. He said he lives in Texas, though. He asked me where I live, and I live in Wisconsin. I don't have any kids, and I was 34 when I met Paul online. He asked me if we could get to know each other and wanted my email address. We exchanged email addresses, and I saw no harm in it at the time. I wrapped up our chat on the message board site, and I told Paul I was looking forward to reading his email. A few hours later, I was greeted by an email by Paul. He introduced himself in more detail. He said he was born in Spain to a Spanish mother and a German father, and he lived in Barcelona until he was 16 years old. He said his parents used to own a construction company and would build roads and bridges in other countries. He said when he was 16, his parents were both killed in an accident while on a job site, and he was forced to move to America and live with his uncle in Texas. When he turned 18, he joined the Army. He said that because of his immigration status, he was given a choice by the government to either go back to Spain alone or join the military and stay in America. So he joined the Army, and he's been in ever since. He then said his uncle died from a heart attack while he was in basic training and he was left all alone in the world. He said the military is his family and it gave him a reason to carry on. Then he met his now ex wife, and then his daughter became his whole world. He asked me to tell more about myself to him. He asked where I lived, if I owned my own home or rented it, and if I'd ever dated someone from online, and if so, what was my experience with online dating. I did not really date online other than I'd had a few in person dates years ago through a dating site, but nothing serious and certainly not something long distance, and I let him know this. Paul said he had met a woman online once, but she had lied and scammed him out of a lot of money. He told me that there's many scammers online and I need to be very careful. He asked me about my favorite music, favorite food, favorite flower, and color. And it was nice to be asked, and I think I was feeling a little vulnerable because I was just cheated on and I was hurt. I wasn't over my ex, and here was this man asking me all of my favorite things and wanting to get to know me. We traded emails back and forth a few times, and he was very sweet. And nearly every morning I had an email from Paul asking how I was, how was my workday going, And at the time, I worked at a hair salon, and it was nice to get these emails, and they kind of meant a lot to me at the time. Paul told me he was being deployed to Yemen for a mission and would be leaving in 2 weeks. I asked him where his daughter stays while he's deployed. He told me the military has assigned a nanny to watch his daughter. He said he'd be gone for around 6 months and then return home. He asked after he returns home if we could meet in person. I told him I'd be willing to and hoped that we could stay in touch while he's gone. He said he would, but he asked if I had WhatsApp because it would be easier to stay in touch rather than just email back and forth. We exchanged numbers, and that night Paul messaged me on WhatsApp and we added each other. I decided to call Paul, and he did answer. We chatted for about an hour on the phone. He told me he was preparing for his deployment, and he said that he was scared and worried because the missions are going to be so dangerous. Paul asked me for pictures of myself, and I'd sent him a few. I was self conscious because my ex always took issue with my weight, but Paul said I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. He sent me pictures of himself, too, and we talked as much as possible leading up to his deployment. When Paul left for his deployment, I was genuinely worried about him. That's when I knew I started to have feelings for him. I wouldn't say love at all, but feelings. I cared for him by this point. Paul left for Yemen and he said he would message me on WhatsApp when he was in the camp and safe in his barracks. It was about 2 days before I heard from Paul. He then messaged me a picture of his bunk and said he was safe in the military camp. He said there was a lot of fighting and issues going on, but he'd be safe for right now. They would have deployment briefings the next day. Paul would message me all the time on WhatsApp, but he said due to the privacy and connection issues, we couldn't voice chat. He was still sending messages, though, nearly every day, and he let me know that he was thinking about me. He would send photos of the area he said he was deployed in, and there was a lot of danger. He said he thought after his deployment that he would end his contract with the military, as he was coming up on his 4 year end of contract and he thought not to renew it. He wanted to retire from the military life, see his daughter grow up, and be together with her full time, and be with me. I loved the thought of meeting Paul in person, and he told me that he was excited for us to meet and felt in his heart that I was different than any woman he knew, and that I was the most beautiful woman he's ever met. I was getting further down this rabbit hole with Paul. My feelings for him grew as the days went on, and I was always worried about him. Paul called me one night, which surprised me, and he said he wanted to hear my voice, and he snuck a phone call to me, even though it was against protocol. He told me that he was struggling there and he felt alone. I told him that he always has me. He told me that the downtime in the barracks is hard because all the other men are married and he's not, and the wives of these other men send gift cards and give them Steam cards to load on their phones to play video games to pass the time. He said he just sat there. I felt bad for him and asked him what a Steam card is, and he said it gives you the ability to download some games on your phone. Paul asked me if I'd be willing to buy him a $100 Steam card to help him out. I'd never heard of them, and I asked where do you buy them? He told me any store sells them, and he texted me photos of what Steam cards look like. I told him maybe I'd try to find one after work. And I remember that evening that I'd gotten off of work really late and I'd come home and I was exhausted. And it was back to school time, so the hair salon was super busy with kids needing haircuts, and I was just exhausted. I had not looked at my messages because I was just so busy at work that day. In fact, I left my phone in my purse most of the day. Paul sent me several messages asking where I was and if I got his card. I finally replied to him telling him I wasn't able to get to the store because I'd had a long day at work. He replied right away asking where I was, and I told him I'm at home. Paul responded telling me that he was so sad as all the other men in his barracks spent their time off playing games on their phones and he sat there just staring at a wall. I told him I'll go tomorrow and try to get a card, and I asked him if we could chat, and he told me he had military duties and just message him tomorrow when I had the card. He quit talking to me. I was so tired I just went to sleep. At the time, I didn't see those red flags. The next day, I bought a Steam card and messaged it to Paul. He replied and thanked me and then went back to being his sweet, loving self. He told me he was going on a mission the next day and he was unable to message me for a few days after because of the location. All of the soldiers have to leave their phones in their barracks for security reasons. He said that he was scared of this mission as it was extremely dangerous. I told him I would pray for him and to focus on coming home and meeting us and being with his daughter and just to do what he had to do and come on home. Paul told me that he missed his daughter and he had not heard from the nanny. He said he wasn't sure if his emails were going through, so he asked me to email the nanny to ask how his daughter is in the event maybe his connection was poor and the email never reached the nanny. I went ahead and emailed the nanny at the email address he gave me, and I told Paul that I'll do it just for him. He went on his mission, and while he was away, I received an email from his daughter's nanny telling me that his daughter was very sick and they had to rush her to an emergency clinic because she had a high fever and she was unable to get in touch with Paul. I told the nanny, whose name was Janet, that Paul was on a mission and likely had no internet connection. The nanny told me that his daughter had fallen ill with a virus and she needed medication and would be released from the hospital, but Paul's bank card declined and that he had left this bank card with the nanny for emergencies and she didn't know what to do. I told her to maybe contact the military as it was my understanding that she was contracted through the military, but she told me it's the responsibility of the parent to pay for any expenses while deployed for their child, and his card had been declined. She said the medicine for his daughter was $300, and she asked if I wanted to pay for the medicine until Paul returns and gets in touch to figure out what's going on. I told her that's a lot of money, and I had no idea how to even get it to her. Well, she gave me the full name and said I could wire the money directly to her to make sure that his daughter gets her medication that she so desperately needs. Janet gave me her full name and then she said she was in Texas. In fact, it was a town called Mercedes, Texas. I told her I'll wire the money so his daughter could get out of the hospital and have the medicine that she needed. I wired it through a wire transfer service, and the nanny emailed me saying his daughter was released from the hospital and resting with her medication, which was working. I heard from Paul a few days later, and he said the mission was so risky, and many were injured, but he made it back okay. I told him what happened, and he was upset. I told him his daughter is resting, but that his bank card was having issues. He told me he would have to wait until he got home to see what's going on. But he feared that his ex, that he had met online and had scammed him, might have gotten a hold of his bank card and information, as she had done it to him before. He said things were so bad here, and the only thing on his mind was meeting me and us being a family, and he thanked me so much for helping his daughter, and he encouraged me to email the nanny to check on his daughter periodically. He told me he would pay me back when he returned home and fixed his account. He said once the deployment was over and all the soldiers were going to get a $25,000 bonus, and he would give me that money to help me. I told him, no, don't do that. Just pay me back the $300 when you get home. But Paul told me he was struggling there, but he'd be glad to pay me back when we meet. We kept communications open, and he messaged me when he could between his missions and everything that was going on there. I would receive emails from the nanny a couple times a week telling me that his daughter was doing a lot better thanks to me. Paul told me that he was able to get in touch with his bank and that his account had been compromised, and he would need to come to the bank to sign a federal legal affidavit to press charges against his ex, who apparently hacked his online bank account and took all his money. So they canceled his account and his card, and he was unsure what to do as he was stuck in Yemen and feeling very confused. I told him once he's home, he can fix everything and just to focus on finishing his job and getting home. Paul had another mission and he would be gone for a few days. I felt love for him. He was so loving to me and he was a great father. All he would do is talk about how much he missed his daughter. The nanny emailed me telling me that Paul's monthly fee didn't go through for his daughter's care, that the nanny received an allowance of $2,000 a month for his daughter's food, school, medicine, and care, and her pay. She said the payment didn't go through. I told the nanny what happened with his bank account and his ex, and she said she needed payment, otherwise, there would be issues as she can't work for free, and each soldier is expected to pay for the care of their children. And if she didn't get paid, she would have to quit caring for his daughter. I messaged Paul what was going on and asked the nanny to give me a few days to figure it out. Paul didn't respond to my messages, but the nanny kept emailing me saying a decision has been made to drop his daughter from her care and she would end up not being looked after. I ended up sending the $2,000 to cover the cost. I knew Paul would be thankful. A couple of days after this, Paul messaged me telling me that there was a security breach at the camp after deployment and all the soldiers had to be relocated and he had to be flown to Germany. He said he was in hiding from the enemy and the military would move him again soon. He said he was confused. I told him what happened with his daughter and needing to pay the nanny. He was upset by this and said the nanny could have waited until he returned home and he was mad that she demanded money from me. I told him I did it to keep his daughter safe and he thanked me but said once he returns back to the States he would be firing the nanny and reporting her. He said he would pay me back when he gets home. Paul said he had to go as the military was evacuating him from Germany for safety reasons, and he'd be in touch. About a week went by and my messages went unread. I received a message on WhatsApp from a new phone number. It had a Texas area code, but I didn't know the number. It was a man calling himself Mr. Dave, who said he was a military relocation manager for the Army and that Paul had been taken into protective custody and would be relocated and given a new identity. I asked him what was going on, and he said that him and his daughter had been relocated and that I need to forget all about Paul. I responded to his message, but it went unread or unresponded. When I went to message Paul, the same thing happened, and I believed I was blocked. I emailed the nanny and received a reply saying the military came and moved his daughter in the middle of the night, and I heard nothing further. I tried calling both numbers, but neither would go through. I believe I was blocked on WhatsApp. I didn't know what to think as everything is taken so quickly from me. I decided to contact the Army through the military website for the actual Army, and I did not receive a reply. There was also a phone number I found for the Army which you can call. I was able to speak to someone at the Army Office of Public Affairs. The man I spoke to told me that it sounds like I'm dealing with some kind of scammer, as the Army doesn't operate that way in regards to a nanny, emergency relocation, and in hiding, and plus the military men won't ask for money. And I knew I'd been frauded. Since this happened, I've deleted WhatsApp as I was getting messages from loads of global numbers, and it started to freak me out. That's my story. I think I was vulnerable from my past relationship, and Paul was sort of a rebound, a costly one at that. I stopped talking to men I met online in groups and forums and learned a costly lesson. Thank you for letting me share. As always, I hope everyone keeps safe and doesn't fall for the handsome and charming army man. Story number 2. The following story was dictated from a phone conversation I had with a man who asked to be called Joe. I'm 74 years young and my wife passed away about a year ago. This took place in August of 2023. I was on FB and responded to a post in a group. I'm a retired trucker, and since my wife died, I've felt extremely lonely. Being retired after being on the road for decades left me feeling a little bored, deflated in life. The young woman named Hannah replied to my post about the trucking industry on an OIDA truckers page. She said she found my profile picture handsome and wanted to get to know me better. I sent her a message saying hello. She responded and told me she thought I was a very handsome man. I told her right away I'm too old for you. She said she thinks age is just a number and that she was 22 years old and from Miami. I told her I'm definitely too old for you at 74, but I'm happy to be your chat buddy. She told me she was single and that her boyfriend had cheated on her and didn't treat her very well, and she moved from Texas to Florida to get away from everything and was doing modeling work. I asked her what kind of model she was, as typically young women who model are doing more than clothing modeling, if you catch my drift. She told me she models swimsuits and sent me a couple photos of herself in bikinis. She said she was a model and saving for college. I told her I could be old enough to be your grandfather. She kept telling me, age doesn't matter, it's just a number. She told me that her parents abandoned her when she turned 18 and threw her out of the house, and she met her ex boyfriend, and he was mean to her and cheated on her all the time, but she stayed with him because she needed a place to live. I told her that sometimes we have to do things in life we don't want to in order to survive. And she told me she was born in Texas, and I told her, well, I'm from Kentucky. Born and bred in Kentucky, and I was a trucker for many decades, but now I'm retired. I told her about my wife's passing, and she asked me if I feel lonely, and she would love to get to know me. I admit it, I enjoyed the chat with this beautiful young woman, and she sent me more photos of herself in different swimsuits. She was gorgeous. Hannah would message me once or twice a day asking what I was doing, how I was, what I'm up to, what I'm feeling. I admit I lead a boring life after being retired. I tinker with projects, but for the most part, I'm home doing a whole lot of nothing. I'm a member of the Eagles Club, so I told her about how I go there for drinks and conversation with other old men like myself. Hannah kept telling me that I'm not old, age is just a number. I asked her how often she models, and she said as much as she can. I warned her about bad people out there in that type of industry, and she told me that she's already met bad people in Miami who took advantage of her kindness and how a few photographers wanted her to model in ways she felt would be a sin, as she's a good, strong Christian woman. I told her she has to keep her wits about her. She said she works part time for a car dealership as a model for the cars. So when rich buyers come in, she stands next to the expensive cars to entice the buyers. I laughed at this and told her she might meet herself a rich man to take care of her. She told me that money doesn't matter to her, but she wants real love, and she told me I was such a nice man. In a way, I was a sounding board for her. She told me how hard life is, and trying to become a famous model was difficult. She said she had roommates, and they all split the rent, as living in Miami is expensive. I told her she needs to move somewhere cheaper, but I'm sure there was many other roommate opportunities that she could find. And there wasn't many opportunities to model in a place like where I live. I'm out in the country. Hannah chatted and sent me pictures all the time, and I sent her ones of myself. There were a few nights I would come home from the Eagles Club a little less than with my mind straight, and a few nights Hannah would send me provocative photos of herself, and I would return the favor, but then regret doing it. Hannah said she loved the photos, and when I was in that state of mind, she would ask for videos and pictures of me. I obliged by sending her several video clips and photos in embarrassing positions I wouldn't want people to know what I did. Hannah asked me a few times if I could buy her Apple cards, as money was tight and she wasn't getting many modeling jobs, and her other job wasn't paying enough. I ended up buying her a handful of Apple cards. She said she keeps her phone running and internet going with these cards. I'd never used them. I didn't know. Hannah would ask me for more and more cards, and I bought them for her when I could, but then she told me her roommate skipped out and left her with the rent for the entire condo that they had lived in, and she was going to be evicted. She asked me for $5,000 to catch up on rent and some bills. I told her that instead she should just come here and stay with me until she can find a job and get on her feet and decide what she wants to do in life. She said no at first, but then told me she'd think it over. I told her my house is paid for and she could just help me around the house, cook meals for me. I told her, I can't send you $5,000, but you're welcome to come here. She told me she was broke and had no money to come to where I live. I offered to pick her up or send her a bus ticket, but she asked instead for $1,000 for a flight. I told her no, and instead I would come get her and asked for her address. She never responded, though, until a few days later, where she told me that if I didn't send the full $5,000 to a certain bank account, and she gave me the bank routing and account number, then she would send my videos and photos that I took when I was less than in my right state of mind to everyone on my friends list, and my adult daughters were on my friends list, as were a lot of my family members. I would be ruined and so embarrassed if they seen what I was doing in those videos. She gave me the profile links to both of my daughters, my sister, and my brother, who are both in their 60s and 70s, respectfully, and my two daughters, who are in their 30s. In fact, they are older than Hannah, but not by much. I was in a panic and begged her not to please be reasonable. I'm an old man. Hannah gave me 48 hours to wire the money through my bank and show her proof I did so, otherwise, she would contact them with the videos and photos I took of myself. I didn't know quite what to do, so I ended up pulling my savings and sending the money via bank transfer to the person's name she gave me. It was a woman's name and a major bank. When I showed Hannah the transfer, she then told me to send another 5,000. I told her that's not part of the deal and I can't afford that, and it would be a total of $10,000. There's no way I can have that kind of money. Hannah then told me to send 3,000 since I'm so poor and pathetic. I begged her in chat and then I panicked and went ahead and blocked her. Hannah, as far as I know, never sent anything to my family. I didn't tell my daughters anything, but I did tell them to block this person and gave them Hannah's information and told them this girl was harassing me for money. So my daughters maybe blocked her. But either way, I never heard from Hannah again, and neither did any of my family, as far as I know. It was a tough lesson, and the bank would not stop the transaction as it had went through, and they could not take it back or cancel it. I know I'm an old lonely man who made a massive mistake. I no longer talk to women online. I stick with my Trucker Owida page, comment on things that I know about. Thank you for letting me share. Anyone can become scammed, even an old man like me. We'd like to thank this gentleman for sharing his story. As I said, I did a phone conversation with him, and he was really struggling to tell his story, but he wanted to get it out there for everybody. Unfortunately, a lot of male scammers pretend to be females online using model photos, and they entice older gentlemen. We've had a lot of retired truckers who have contacted us with very similar stories where they meet a younger woman online and they're enticed by their beauty and the attractive photos, and then they either make a mistake or they just send money or gift cards and they really don't know what they're getting involved in or what they've done. If you'd like to share your story, whether you lost money or not, you can find us on Facebook under the page Scamming Cyber Education, or you can drop us an email, scammingscammers@gmail.com. You can either write us an email about what happened, send us photos if you have any proof, screenshots, whatever you have. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to share your story can help others. Until next time, stay safe and don't send money to people that you meet online or gift cards either.